In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to do a fake cover lock or cover stitch. Now, the reason I'm calling it a fake version is because it looks very similar to a cover lock or cover stitch, but it is done using the sewing machine and possibly the overlocker or serger, rather than a cover lock or cover stitch machine, which is what you need to do the official cover lock or cover stitch. You may also find that you're lucky enough to have an overlocker where you can amend the settings to allow you to do a cover lock or cover stitch. The cover stitch has a twin needle stitch on the front and a sort of overlocked or serged finish on the back, and you'll usually find it on the hem of your jersey or knit garments. With this fake stitch, we're going to do the twin needle on the sewing machine and either use the overlocker or serger to finish the wrong side, or if you don't have one of those, you can simply leave it with just the twin needle on the sewing machine. This is what the wrong side would look like. You can see that there's a zigzag stitch, and this is the bobbin stitch. There's only one thread in the bobbin, which is why it zigzags between the two top threads. In order to do this stitch, you are going to need to get a twin needle. You're going to want to get a twin needle that is a jersey or ballpoint, so that it's suitable for your stretch fabric. Twin needles come in a variety of different widths between the two needles. This sample here is 4mm width, this one is 3mm, so you can have a play with the look that you like. If you're unsure about how to thread up your machine for a twin needle, I do have a video you can watch, and I'll pop a link to that here. Now, I really like the fake version of this stitch. It provides a really professional looking finish. But there is one downside to it, and that is that it does not allow the fabric to stretch very much because it's been completed on the sewing machine. So what I would recommend is that you only use it on garments where there isn't going to be much stretch in the area. So for example, if I was making a dress from a medium to thick weight jersey, weight here is like a double knit or a pontoroma, it would be perfect. The hem of the sleeves and the hem of the garment aren't going to have much stretch, so it's going to give it a nice professional finish. If you're working with perhaps a lighter weight jersey, maybe a very slim fitting t-shirt or cami that needs to stretch to fit you, you will probably find that this stitch will break over time. So it may not be the best choice in that case. Now, in order to create a neat and professional looking hem, you may want a little bit of help to support your knit fabric. And this depends on how stretchy your knit fabric is and how lightweight it is as well. You can use fusible stretch interfacing, and you would iron this on and place this on the wrong side of your hem, making sure that the fusible interfacing was going to be stitched into. So you can have it so that it's pretty much hidden, but you need to make sure you're going to be stitching into that. And that will help to support the hem if you find that the stitches aren't looking overly neat when you do this. The other option is to use something like Wonder Tape. And Wonder Tape is a double-sided adhesive that washes away. You can simply place the Wonder Tape onto one side of the wrong side of your fabric, remove the backing, and then you can position it in place. And that will stick the hem in position, hold everything flat for you, but it will also support that area slightly. I would recommend that you test your hemming that you're planning to do on your fabric. Then you'll know whether you will need some fusible stretch interfacing or Wonder Tape to help support it. Now, there are two options when you're going to be using a twin needle. You can either overlock or serge the edge of the fabric like I have on this one, or you can leave it plain. We're going to go to the sewing machine and I will share with you how to sew the twin needle, and then you can decide which method works best for you. Obviously, by having your overlocking stitch or serging stitch on the wrong side of your garment, it will look more like a cover lock or cover stitch machine. Now, we're aiming to create something like this with the twin needles. So a couple of things you might need to think about. You may need to increase your stitch length, and you may have to have a play with some of the settings to make sure that you have a nice flat stitch. It obviously depends on your sewing machine. I would recommend using a walking foot when you are sewing with your jersey or knit fabrics. It will just help to move that through the machine. Obviously, my other tip about adding that interfacing or something to support this is good. If you don't have interfacing or you don't want to add any interfacing and you're struggling, you can also use some stabilizer tearaway stabilizer, wash away stabilizer, that would also work. Now I've got my twin needle on my sewing machine. I've increased my stitch length to 3.5 millimeters, and I've got my walking foot on. Now the distance of your hem might be different to mine. Obviously it depends on what you're working with. And at the back of using a twin needle is going to look something like this. Because you only have one bobbin thread, it will zigzag sort of between the two needles. But you want to be sewing relatively close to the top of your hem allowance. So you're going to need to work out what you can use as a guide here to allow you to stitch in the right place. I tend to put my needles in. I use my finger to feel where the ridge of the hem allowance is. You can lift the foot and you can really check that you want to stitch both needles on the hem allowance. You don't want the left hand needle to be falling off. You want both of the needles on and be relatively close. So the left needle you want to be about an eighth, perhaps a 16th, so 2 to 3 millimeters away from the edge of your hem. And once you've found out what works, you can then use something. I'm going to be using this line here as my guide, which makes it nice and easy. Then it's a case of guiding this through the sewing machine, just as normal. Obviously, I've threaded my sewing machine up with 2 threads on the top. If you are unsure how to do that, I do have a video that shows you, and I'll pop a link to it here. And you would sew this all the way around your hem. I recommend starting at a side or back seam so that it's an invisible area where you start. And obviously you can backstitch. Alternatively, tie off your threads on the inside. And there you have your finished stitch. Now I used a 3 millimeter stitch length to complete mine, and I didn't have to change the tension on my machine. Be aware that you may have to change the tension on your machine. It just depends on the machine that you're using. If you're having any problems, such as tunneling, which is when the 2 threads come together and create a groove in the middle, make sure that you do follow all my tips. Use a walking foot, perhaps play with the tension, make sure that you interface, and you can use a stabilizer as well if you would like to. Worst case scenario is that you may need to play with your bobbin tension. Please watch my tension video before you do this, and if you find you need to do this, make sure that you purchase a second bobbin case because you don't want to be affecting the tension on your everyday sewing. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and thank you for watching.